If she finds out I got fired for drinking, she's gonna blame me.
Lie to her. It's okay to lie to women. They're not people like us.
I don't know.
Hey, where's the other guy?
Let's talk morality. Are people born good or are they born evil? And before you roll your eyes, this isn't just philosophical fluff. How we answer this question matters because it will determine how we treat children, punish criminals, write laws, structure society, and even how we see ourselves. You see, if we're naturally kind, maybe we just need support, guidance, and education. But if we're fundamentally selfish and cruel, maybe we need extra consequence, punishment, surveillance to stop us from destroying one another. Maybe it's both, maybe it's neither, but regardless, today we're going to be looking at what philosophers and scientists have to say about the matter, and so please join me in tackling one of the oldest, most haunting questions there are people born good or evil? Okay, welcome back to Ish Matters, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here on this episode. It's been a while. I'm inconsistent in making these. Please forgive me. Also, please forgive the inconsistent lighting in this episode because I'm using natural light, so the sun will be setting throughout the video. Maybe I'll have a golden hour moment, maybe not, doesn't matter. Let's get into the episode. So you've probably heard of the Milgram experiment, where ordinary people were instructed to deliver increasingly painful shocks to another person in a different room. And the shocks weren't real, but the belief was. Shockingly, pun not intended, but also kind of intended, most people continued to deliver increasingly painful shocks, even though the other person in the room might be screaming in pain. Why? Because a man in a lab coat instructed them to. And then there's the infamous Stanford prison experiment by Philip Zimbardo, where he assigned his students these roles of guard and prisoner in a fake prison. And this was meant to be a 2-week study, but what happened was that the guards, or the students cosplaying as guards, became so high and drunk off their power that they became sadistic. They started abusing the prisoners in real life, actual abuse, and it had to be shut down in 6 days. So it only took very ordinary students 6 days to start abusing their power and abusing other students. So the point of bringing up these two experiments is to show you that neither of these experiments included bad people. There were just ordinary people placed into systems that brought out bad behavior. But what does this mean about innate morality? This brings me to Hannah Arendt and her concept of the banality of evil. See, Arendt attended the trial of one of the architects of the Holocaust, and she was shocked that this man wasn't necessarily this monster. He was boring, unimaginative, he was dull and bureaucratic at most. And she came up with this idea that evil doesn't have to be so dramatic or grand or intentional. Sometimes evil is just a lack of consciousness. Sometimes evil is just paperwork. Sometimes it's just doing your job. Sometimes it's just the refusal to think critically about what you're doing. So being evil doesn't necessarily mean being actively cruel. Maybe it's just the absence of effort or consciousness to be good. So morality might not be just what's inside of you. It might just be the system you're placed into. But that's a hot take. But speaking of hot takes, let's talk about Nietzsche, because Nietzsche basically invented hot takes before social media. I'm willing to support that claim if you need me to. Let's talk about what he thought, because Nietzsche didn't necessarily ask what is moral or where did it come from. He said, why do we consider things moral and some things not? Why do we call humility a virtue and pride a sin? Why do we reward meekness but demonize ambition? These are really cool questions. And Nietzsche believed it came down to two competing moral systems: master morality and slave morality. Gotta sit up straight for this Nietzsche talk. So for basically all of human history, there was always an oppressor and an oppressed, a weak and a strong, someone who led and someone who was led. And because of this, there are two types of morality. The oppressors will develop their own morality. They will ask, not, is this right? They will ask, is it life affirming for me? Is it worthy of me? And so their morality becomes the virtues they exhibit or possess, like ambition and strength and determination, decisiveness, etc. And a few other things like, the need to conquer, I guess. But then there is slave morality, which is everything in opposition to master morality. Slave morality is not born out of power, it's born out of resentment. Slaves, or the weak, or the disenfranchised, came along and wanted to flip the script. They said, hey, your strength is weakness, and my weakness is virtue. But really, it's a deep simmering resentment disguised as virtue. And according to Nietzsche, this is where we get the glorification of suffering. the idealization of humility. And if you really think about it, I mean, slave morality kept people alive. If you said, hey, if resisting, if fighting for power, if speaking up about being oppressed was going to get me killed, then I must teach myself and my kin or whoever comes after me that being quiet and obedient and not having the same ambitions, not having the same strength is actually a good thing. It's a virtue. It's like, to bring it down to real life, from abstract concept to like understandable daily behavior, it's if you strove towards something and you pursued it with all your might, an opportunity, a job, let's say, and you got denied or rejected. See, the slave morality will help you flip that script and say, I didn't even want that job. It's not even for me. It's not the right thing for me. And that is exactly what slave morality is doing. It's trying to take what you're missing from the master morality who is oppressing you or who is in control of you and trying to call those things virtues. I hope I explained that correctly. What I'm trying to get at here is that sometimes morality is created as a form of dignity in the face of domination or a form of cohesion with people who are in your similar situation. And what Nietzsche is saying is not to just be a jerk, it's to ask, where is this morality coming from? Where are these ideas coming from? And are they really serving us? Okay, but I can't talk about Nietzsche without talking about some of the other philosophers. And by the way, this is my hot take, even though I think philosophers invented hot takes. But I think philosophers were like the OG podcasters before microphones existed. You know? It kind of makes sense. So let's start with Thomas Hobbes, the original moral doer. In Leviathan, he argues that humans are naturally selfish and brutal and cruel. And he argued that without a central authority, something to hold us accountable, life would be solitary, short, and brutish. And he argued that morality doesn't come out of nature, not at all. It comes out of a need to not get stabbed in the night. Because we just need to hold each other accountable so that that inner evil won't come out, because if it does come out, we'll all just kill each other. But then Rousseau came and clapped back and said, no, no, no. Humans are naturally pure and good, and it's the systems that bring out the evil in us. He argued that man is free, but everywhere he is in chains. The systems, the government, the institutions are what corrupt us. And if we didn't have those, we would all just be happy, dilly-dally loving people. And so for him, morality exists within us, and brokenness is learned from broken systems. Immanuel Kant says, I don't have time for any of this nature versus nurture BS. I think morality is just reason. In Kant's groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, I know, a mouthful, he introduced the categorical imperative, which is kind of what he's known for. And basically, he argues that you should only act according to the principles you will to become universal law, or universal moral law. And basically he's saying, like, do unto others how you would wish others to do unto you, kind of thing, kind of vibes. He's basically saying that you should act in accordance to principles using reason, not emotion, not, none of this like innate stuff. Use logic and reason and think. Would I want the world to behave in this way, to operate in this way? If yes, proceed. If no, don't proceed. And then in the East, we have Confucius, who was like, no, it's not about principles or rules or whatever. It's about practice. Basically, some morality is something we need to practice, like playing the flute. It's something we need to learn and do over and over and over again until we get really good at it. And it doesn't really matter what's within us or what's not within us. It matters what we are taught and what we practice, what becomes habit. And so for Confucius, it was kind of like this ritualistic thing. You do and reflect and do and reflect, and you get better at it. So there's that duality again. Some people care about principles, some people care about what is innate within us. Some people say it's the systems around us, some people say it's us within ourselves. And that's really confusing. So it didn't really give us much of an answer. Let's see if science can give us a clear answer. Babies. So what do baby brains have to tell us about morality? Because what better way to understand innate human nature than to strip away years of indoctrination and socialization and learning and look at the little infants, the little cute babies. What do they do? What are they naturally gravitated towards? Actually, I'm always inspired to study children because very long ago, like 10 years ago, I watched this show called The Secret Lives of 5-Year-Olds. And it's amazing what you can, and basically psychologists like sit behind a camera and they observe this like kindergarten daycare type situation and they look at how children act. And it's such a beautiful thing to learn from because we can learn a lot from kids. and we're reminded of who we once were before all of this like indoctrination happened, right? Anyways, so at Yale's Infant Cognition Center, which is also dubbed the Baby Lab, such a cool name, they did this really simple but pretty mind-blowing experiment. They took infants and they made them watch a puppet show. So one puppet was struggling to go up a hill, one puppet came and helped, and a third puppet came and pushed that struggling puppet down the hill. And then after the experiment, the infants were given the option to choose a puppet. Extraordinarily, infants who can't even formulate a sentence almost always chose the helper puppet. And they chose the helper puppet, but not only that, some of them even slapped or like threw the puppet that didn't help, the puppet that threw the other puppet down the hill. So many puppets in this sentence. But basically, that shows you that it is innate within us to gravitate towards helpers and not people who harm. Infants who don't know anything, they weren't trying to please their parents, they weren't understanding that this is an experiment, they had no bias coming into it, almost always preferred to choose the puppet that helps. But then it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? Because those same infants will snatch a toy out of another child's hand, or they'll throw a fit if someone touches their toy, or they will exercise empathy, compassion, selfishness, and cruelty all in the same breath. So, how can we say that kindness or morality is innate? And so maybe we're just born with moral potential, not necessarily morality. Maybe that potential needs to be cultivated in either direction, and that's really what matters. We're like unrefined ore. We have this capacity to be shaped. Sure, we have some building blocks like empathy, hence our mirror neurons, and kindness, but we also have the capacity to protect our resources, to survive, this tenacity for it, where we will do so at all costs, even if that means hurting another person. And what's cool is that humans are not the only species who exhibit morality, so we get to learn from other animals in the animal kingdom. Primatologist Frans de Waal, which by the way, I didn't even know that primatology was its own field. That's so cool. Do you think it's cool? I think it's cool. He's spent his life studying chimpanzees and bonobos, which are just other types of monkeys, I think. And basically, what he found is that they reconcile after fights. They share food, they comfort the distressed, and they even punish the ones who do something bad. So this idea of being animalistic or being primitive being bad and being monstrous and selfish and just caring about your survival is actually not true. We see this in bats sharing food and caring for the sick. We even see this in trees who share resources through their roots when one tree is struggling. So cooperation isn't just cute, it's an evolutionary strategy. You see, tribes who helped each other could survive much longer than an individual can. People in societies who shared food and cared for their sick could build that tribe resilience and ensure survival of the group. Which brings me to kin altruism, which is like this interesting exception to everything we're talking about. So kin altruism is this idea that we will do anything to protect our kin, which are, brothers, sisters, cousins, parents, anyone who has pieces of our DNA, basically. So if you run into a burning building to save your sibling, you're not just saving your sibling, you're saving a piece of your own genetic material, ensuring that your genetic material keeps getting passed on for as long as it possibly can. And then there's reciprocal altruism, which is just basically doing something because someone did something good for you, or doing something because there's the anticipation of that someone being there for you when you need it, which is a little bit more complicated. But then there's this book, The Altruistic Species, right here. And basically, what the authors argue is that when it comes to humans, we're a little bit more complex than just kin selection and reciprocal altruism, like animals, for example. They argue for something a little bit deeper than that. But why? Why are humans fundamentally more complex than animals? And the answer is it's because we expand. We build religion, philosophies, communities that might not really mean anything, but in the abstract, to us, it does mean something. We take that biological foundation and we stack floors and floors above it. We build ethics and ideas of universal moral laws, which are things animals can't necessarily do. So, what the authors are arguing is that we willingly and intentionally expand our circles of concern beyond kin, beyond tribe, beyond something that we could tangibly point to as the reason we sacrifice our time, resources, or even self for another person. And that can be good and that can be bad, depending how you look at it. Imagine someone donating a kidney to someone they don't know, or a woman jumping into a freezing cold river to save a child that isn't even hers. You see, we've expanded our circles of concern so much that we started sacrificing ourselves for people who are not kin and who maybe don't necessarily deserve it. And what the authors argue is that we do this because of moral heroism and because we're just great and there's no reason behind it. But a lot of scientists and a lot of philosophers would beg to differ. They argue that, well, most argue that there's always, always, always a reason to the sacrifices we make as humans. Because at the end of the day, we're run by our genes, and our genes want to survive. They want to pass on that genetic material for as long as humanly possible to as many people as possible. And so it doesn't really make sense just to do things out of the goodness of your heart. Even if it's not as malicious as it sounds. Maybe your reason for doing something is because it feels good to you, which we'll get into in a second. Maybe that is literally your only reason, which is pretty good. It's like do the ends justify the means kind of thing. And sometimes it's because evolutionarily, people who helped other people or who sacrificed things for other people were valued more in the society or in the community or in the tribe. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's just reputation. Maybe it's ego. Maybe it's so many other things. The point is that a lot of people argue that there has to be something behind altruism, whether it be the genetic survival or the, you know, inflation of your own ego or just proving your worth or existence. Um, but the point is, I disagree with the authors, and many other people disagree with the authors, that humans just evolved to do things because we're just so great and wonderful. Seems unlikely, doesn't it? But hey, maybe you disagree. In the end, this is the duality again. Biology, philosophy, psychology, and theory all give us very conflicting messages, which is why this conversation is so fun. Okay, but speaking of feeling good, what's actually happening inside of our brains when we commit a moral or immoral action? Let's start with moral. So, Jonathan Haidt, who I talk about pretty much in every episode now, or like 90% of them. So, if you don't know Jonathan Haidt by now, look him up, read some of his books. He's a great guy, I think. I don't know. But he's a great author. And he talks about moral intuition and intuitionism. Intuitionism. I like it. Basically, he says that we have this like gut reaction of a snap judgment. We do an action and then we scramble to explain it to ourselves and to others or to justify it. It's not really coming with like a lot of thought built in and then we do the moral action. It just happens and then we place reason onto it and explain it that way. So when you have this like knee jerk reaction, let's say someone fell into a river, you have this knee jerk reaction to go and help them. So, yes, your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making and higher order thinking and planning, might be involved a little bit, but it's not really what's the main player here. The main player is the amygdala, the much more primitive and faster part of your brain. Your amygdala is where kind of like the mirror neuron action happens. When you see someone in pain, you're in pain. When you see someone happy, you're happy. You want to react because you feel with the person. Empathy, if you will. And so maybe you jump into that river and save the drowning child as this knee jerk reaction, not necessarily as a thought out action. But then afterwards, you explain it with, it was the right thing to do. Someone would do this for me. Someone would do this for my child. This good will come back onto me later in life. Or, hey, look at that. Now I'm viewed as like a morally heroic person. So, what Jonathan Haidt is arguing is that morality is quite innate because of those mirror neurons and because of that empathy that is built into us. And then everything after that is just the stuff we put on top, the reasoning and the linguistics and the semantics, if you will. He talks about this a lot when he's explaining the hive switch. So the hive switch is when the I dissolves into we. And this happens in communities where you feel a strong sense of bonding and oneness with. It can be a political party, it can be a religious group or an ethnic group. But basically, when you're with these people, the group survival becomes key. You will sacrifice yourself and maybe a lot of what you have or own for the group survival or the group's interest. And this is really interesting because it's not like you're making that snap moral judgment to help one person. You're making a snap moral judgment maybe for a community, which goes against everything biologists say about the survival of the genetic material or the survival of the gene. But then if you look at it from a different lens, you find that compassion and empathy and the willingness to sacrifice yourself for others is actually quite tribal. You're much more likely to do it for people who look like you, for people who are in the same group as you. Paul Bloom calls this empathy's blind spot, where empathy is not equally distributed amongst everyone. It's pretty selective in who it's given to and to what extent it is given to. Maybe you see someone getting harassed and you have the thought, I'd love to save them, but maybe you won't save them. But if you take that person and switch them out to be a person from your own religious group or from your class, let's say, you are much more likely to jump in and save that person, which is great, but also can, gives us an idea about racism and violence and othering, where we're much more okay or accepting of violence and horror happening to people who aren't us or aren't in group. Okay, so what do we do with all of this? Well, we can recognize that morality is both a gift and a glitch. It's rooted in biology, shaped by culture, and often distorted by bias. We need to take into consideration our emotions and our systems, our instincts and our ethics, our snap judgments and our reasoning. We can't just rely on emotions alone because emotions can be distorted, but we can't live in this like cold-hearted, detached society because empathy is what makes us human and what allows us to survive and bond the way we do. And so, are we born good or are we born evil? Yes, no, kind of neither, right? It's much more complex than that. We are creatures of potential. We have empathy and we have cruelty. We have the desire to help and we have the desire to hoard. We have instincts that make us want to survive at all costs, but we have instincts to not allow other people to suffer because that will lead to our own suffering sometimes, right? If you're like an empathetic person and not a sadist and not a masochist, which those people are exceptions. I'm not talking about those people. The point is, we have both within us. And what matters most is what we nurture. So maybe the question isn't, are we good or evil? It's what are we becoming? What do we practice? What do we tolerate? What do we teach ourselves and our kin and the generations that come after us? Maybe the question is, what systems are we building to bring out either the good or the bad? Because in the end, morality isn't just something we have, it's something we make, we build together. Hello, future Rania here. So I completely forgot to touch on something I really wanted to touch on, which is social media. I was going through my notes and realized that I just completely forgot to talk about it. And so without much articulation or skill in saying this or eloquence, I want to say that social media, there's this duality to it, right? I have a lot of mixed feelings. On one hand, it has connected us. We can cry about watching a video of a rescue in a different country. We could raise money for someone we'll never meet. We could know about the world and learn about cultures and develop empathy and compassion for different groups of people. But the opposite can happen as well, and it really kind of does. Through a screen, you could be incredibly kind, but you can be incredibly cruel. You could feel a sense of connection to a group and a sense of disconnection to a different group based on 7-second clips. You could completely alienate and other a group of people based on something someone said online, which is very crazy. And then there's, the lack of morality in a lot of people joke about this, but if you post something on Instagram, you will receive a very different reaction than when you post something on TikTok. And usually people will do comparison videos of like the same video on TikTok, go through the comments, and then go through the comments on Instagram. And on Instagram, you find people a lot more cruel. And that's funny, and it's rewarded, and it's praised, and it amasses thousands or millions of views and likes and comments. In fact, I have fallen victim to it, which is why I wanted to talk about this. I would like to think of myself as a moral person, don't we all? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm actually selfish and I lie and I do things not in other people's best interest. Maybe. I don't know. I'd like to think that my higher order thinking is always trying to do the right thing or trying to do the good thing, but maybe not. Where I find myself slipping is that on social media, I have become more and more desensitized to things like making fun of people, things like racist jokes, things like ableist or misogynistic or sexist jokes, which is crazy because, I'm included in the group of women. I should feel a sense of connection to them and loyalty to them and not want them to be insulted. Um, but I find that social media has degraded my own sense of morality and has kind of skewed my moral compass. And so I just think it's important to talk about what we consume online as well. what kind of people we follow, what kind of lies are we believing, and how it's shaping what we view as okay and not okay. You know, a long time ago, maybe if you said a racist joke, I would have been very angry about it. Now, I think genuinely, if you said a racist joke and it was funny, I would laugh at it, and I wouldn't reprimand you for it. I wouldn't criticize you for it, which is so sad to think about how my morals have just degraded over time because of social media use and because of what I'm consuming. So, this doesn't really tie in very well to the rest of the episode, but I really wanted to talk about it and wanted to open up about this one thing and be vulnerable, and maybe you guys feel the same way. And just, remind us that what we consume and the time spent on social media can have a huge influence on what we view as okay and not okay, and that can seep into many other parts of our life. Because at first it's just laughing or not laughing at a joke, and then it seeps into how we treat people subconsciously. Our minds are fickle, and humans are not as rational and consistent as we think we are. So yeah. Okay. Future Danya out. Continuing on with the episode. Bye. And on that note, I think we should end here. This conversation can obviously go on forever and ever and ever. It has in the philosophy world. But I think I'm going to cut it here, and I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. So drop a comment below. Tell me what you guys think. Are we born good? Are we born bad? Is society what corrupts us, or are we just inherently corrupted and then society just gives way to more corruption? Tell me what you think. I'm genuinely interested in hearing, because I haven't made a decision about the question. I don't know the answer to are we born good or evil. I just know that we have the capacity to do such extraordinary things, and we have the capacity to commit such atrocities, and humans are so complicated, and I want to hate them and I want to love them, and then I land on I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm just trying to get through life like everybody else. So on that note, stay happy, stay healthy, and I will see you next time here on this channel.